and welcome to the podcast, Futurised, Swiss Re in Conversation with Tech Startups. I'm your host, Pavithra. I lead the Center of Excellence for Quality for Enterprise IT at Swiss Re as my day job. Spending 2 decades in the industry and working with various domains and roles, I have many perspectives to IT. Today, we are here to discuss the role of enterprise architecture in today's changing world. In this episode of Futurize, we will take a peek into the world of architecture. What are the critical influences that are changing the face of enterprise architecture? We are in conversation with Shayak and Niall, who will share their insights on the subject. Shayak?
Thanks a lot, Pavithra. Quick introduction. I am a practicing enterprise architect, not a real one. I I started my career with the Indian Navy. I was a nuclear biological chemical warfare specialist and a helicopter operator, and after that, ran some small hotels and restaurants in Goa. And from there, I went on to do my MBA at France, and after that, I joined a global MNC. I was heading 21 countries for them. Then I started with my own technology startups. So over time, I've kind of become quite adept at enterprise architecture from a practicing point of view. I haven't done any formal education in this space, but since we worked with very small businesses in the beginning, and then a very large number of small businesses, and then we started working with medium-sized businesses, and then now we are working with the largest of enterprises. We've actually graduated over the years. And also, I think we worked in various different spheres. We worked in artificial intelligence, a little bit in blockchain, and we worked a lot in supply chain management as well as large technology implementation. And last year we launched, in 2022, we launched something very exciting. We launched the world's first open source platform for commerce. There's a very funny story I'll tell later in the thing. Over to you, Pavithra. Thanks. That's my introduction.
Niall?
I'm the head of enterprise architecture at Swiss Re. For those of you who don't know, Swiss Re is one of the leading providers of reinsurance, insurance, and other risk-based products, insurance risk-based products in the world. I'm the head of enterprise architecture. My background actually is a software developer. I started many years ago as a software developer, sort of very technical stuff. What today would be something equivalent to an SRE. And one of the things that's driven me throughout my career is there's always been an intersection between technology and business. And so I did many things. I worked as a software developer and product-based software development for quite some time. I went back to university to do some research on software reuse. I thought we could build, I was back in the day, I thought we could build automated software reuse. That turned out to be a fallacy, but anyway. And then I moved into the IT service sector. So I spent a lot of time working in IT service with various different industries, really about delivering software, which may be sort of very delivery and outcome focused. Interesting, Shayak saying he's a practicing enterprise architect. I'm not a traditional enterprise architect either. I'm very focused on what's this do for the business? What does it do for us? And less about models and stuff. That's always, something I'm interested in, but so it's very important. And then about 6 years ago, I joined Swiss Re as an enterprise architect. And there was really to understand, in the case of the financial industry, so I worked as at the service side, I really wanted to see how financial industries solve the problem of innovation and technology, bringing modern technology, things like public cloud, into the business and marrying those two together.
That is actually very interesting to know. And every time you mentioned that, you had to go back to do research, I think we are at a stage where all of us need to keep going back to the academics to make sure that we are abreast with the changing technology and changing world. Okay, that brings us back to our first question. And we've been talking a lot about enterprise architecture. So could you explain in brief, in your own lens, because both of you come from two different sects of the market, right? One coming from a big, huge corporate and the other one coming from a startup. So enterprise architecture in your own lens. Niall?
Sure. I think the first thing to say is that enterprise architecture is different in every single company. So I've seen it in many companies. It really is very, very different. So it's not just between big and small, but also it's very different because we sit at the intersection between technology and business, and every organization thinks about business differently, even within the same business. Okay, so that's one thing. The second thing is, in the case where we are, which is in the finance industry, is you have regulation, which brings another complexity into your life as an enterprise architect. So how do you do all the cool tech things and makes the try and do business in an innovative way, but also regulation as a constraint. So having said that, I mean, I think from my perspective, and where I'll talk about how we practice this in Swiss Re, it's really about we make what we call a blueprint for our IT ecosystem. So if you can think about as an organization, how do we move forward? How do we invest in the right technologies? And enterprise architecture is playing that key role, which is structuring the problem space to enable us to invest in the right technologies. If you think about it as well, is that I'll give you an example, a very simplistic example. Swiss Re provides services to our customers through APIs. What role does enterprise architecture play there? And we actually play two roles there. One is that what we want is that APIs are a business case. You actually provide, how you provide the API and what services you provide is one thing, but also the technology underneath it. Which technology should you use for that? REST-based services. So many things. There's lots of newer things out there in the market. And from an enterprise architecture perspective, we're doing two things. One is we're getting all the guys in the company providing APIs to do it in the same way, so it's easier for our customers to use those services, and also there's a certain amount of consistency. But we're also pushing the technology platforms inside Swiss Re to make sure we provide all those, what I call infrastructure services, so the people who write APIs can do the thing that's important, which is writing the business code for our customers, and not spend their time writing things like security and writing things like compliance. We try and do that all in platforms inside Swiss Re. So that provides, that platform provides a way for our teams to innovate and be efficient at providing business to our customers. And that's what enterprise architecture is doing. It's doing that at both levels, as an example.
Thank you, Neil. And I think giving it an example and giving it something for the viewers to correlate and relate, I think makes it easier for us to understand the subject. And it's a very complicated subject as well, right? I mean, because we have many certifications, many documents that talk so much about enterprise architecture, and it is really nice to have a small example to correlate our understanding of enterprise architecture. And Shayak, I'm sure you have a completely different perspective, and we are here to we are really curious to understand how you see it.
Okay, so no, it's not different. It's actually exactly the same as what Neil said, but I'll come at it from a startup point of view, and I'll tell you a story. So, I started off by creating a platform to help small businesses to sell from India across 100 countries, right? So we integrated the marketplaces in every country, the payment options, etc. So we did that. Where we got stuck was government regulations. The regulations were not in place. So no matter what we did in technology, the sellers who were selling did not get a customs documentation. So when they got paid, even if they showed the marketplace invoice, the tax authorities didn't accept it. And they said, you have no record of shipping anything outbound from India. So you're going to come to court and tell us why you are money laundering. Okay. And I actually made a couple of major, yatras to the finance minister and the minister of commerce at that time. I spoke to the director general customs, God knows how many times, trying to explain to them, please understand the small businesses are dying. And, that's what was the situation those days. And then COVID came, and I was forced to shift over to creating a supply chain management system, which I was selling in the Middle East. This was good, right? So there were about 30 different enterprises, including IKEA and all, who were using our software in the Middle East. Where we got stuck was, we took that software outside of the Middle East and we tried to launch it in the US, and it completely failed. The reason why it completely failed was that it genuinely did not have the composable parts to make it interchangeable for different geographies. So first time I learned the lesson that regulations have to be taken into account. Next time I learned the lesson that geography has to be taken into account. So then in November 2021, I got started on building the world's first open source platform for commerce. Mouthful, because it was a huge amount of work. We researched finance, payments, we researched regulations around every possible thing. We researched supply chain, marketing, operations, finance, and we created an operating system where people could come and build their own marketplaces, could build their own omni-channel platform, sell wherever. Do whatever you want to do, B2B, B2C, retail, e-commerce, domestic, cross-border, figure it out. We even launched our own app store where we built an app builder where people could build their apps, launch it in that app store. Last and the most critical bit was we integrated 80 different software, and we created an integration platform where people could come and integrate their software as well. We launched,
Wow.
It took us 1 year to build this. And guess what happened? I launched this in August 2022, end of August 2022. And in October, I came across ONDC. And in November, I decided to throw it all away and start off on ONDC.
Oh, wow.
Yes. So that is enterprise architecture in practice. We did every bit of research, building that open source platform for commerce. Large companies were starting to use it. But when I came across ONDC, I realized that the need for it was gone. And in a year or two, ONDC would be the default protocol. We would not be needed unless we made a pivot. And rather than doing it 2 years later, I wanted to do it before the market had moved on. So whatever work we put in for a year and a half, incredible amount of hard work, no Christmas, no New Year, no Holi, no Ramadan, no chutti. We basically worked around the clock, literally, and we built this incredible platform. And it took me a week to take that decision that I have to start again.
Oh,
And we
wow.
started. And we started again. We started again to create something called ONDC in a box. And you know the beauty of this? We created ONDC in a box and launched it end of April. In May, we have 40 large enterprises who are in late stage of the pipeline. 1 month. Enterprise sales doesn't happen in 1 month. Enterprise sales take 6 months to get to procurement. And these are very large enterprises we're talking about, who have crossed that entire threshold in 1 month because they really need, and nobody else has it. So it's not like what we built earlier went to waste. We built that entire thing, and then we recreated it for ONDC. We had an advantage over everybody else. But that's enterprise architecture in practice for you.
Absolutely. I mean, it's like Thomas Edison's story of 1,000 ways to fail, right? And I think it gives us a lot of good lessons, and also, I mean, I'm really in awe with the decision-making part that you have, right? I mean, because most of us would have slept over months to take the decision to take away or scrap something that you built for a complete year. I really have to give you a Roman salute for a week.
No, I've only spoken about the technology part of it because there were so many business decisions. I had to speak to my investors to tell them that I'm shifting to India. I had to speak to my employees and tell them I'm starting a new company in India. There were so many things associated with it, which is not enterprise architecture. So we'll not go into it. But that basically, it comes from the market, right? It always comes from the market. You have to follow the market. You do not know what is the best thing to do.
Oh, I think
I feel your pain, Shayak. I really feel your pain there. What's the market want? This is the big thing, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So get closer to the stakeholders, get closer to the customers. I think, on the same note, because we've been discussing about the challenges, that brings me back to the second question, what we wanted to discuss is what are the key opportunities and challenges enterprise architecture faces in today's changing world?
Should I go first?
Yes, please. Because you continue to do with the challenges, and now we continue to talk about the opportunities as well now.
Yeah, I think we are living in an incredible world. I think a change like this is happening. I don't think a change like this has happened since the 1995. We are living in an incredible world today. The age of AI and the age of protocols is upon us. And, borrowing lines from Transformers. But the point is the age of AI is indeed on us. And this is true because, everything has that sigmoid curve. And when you look at that sigmoid curve of adoption, you start realizing that we could be at the very beginning of the sigmoid curve. And if we're at the very beginning of the sigmoid curve, everything we've done till date, everything we've learned till date is past, is history. If we are at the middle of the sigmoid curve, we'll be safe. I just don't know where in that sigmoid curve we're sitting today. But if we are sitting at the beginning of that sigmoid curve, all our business models are dead. Or everything we've learned in technology, we'll have to relearn. We are basically sitting here, the people who are in Universities today are better off than us because they'll know it better than we do. Our experience stands for nothing if you're at the beginning of that sigmoid curve. And this is like, I did an experiment with, and so the first decision I took, and I took this decision 2.5 months ago, is that I'll build my own large language model. I'm building my own large language model on conversational commerce, the first of its kind in India. And I've just started the collaboration with the Indian School of Business, etc. It's going to come out soon. And we've collected significant amounts of data now over the last 2 months. We tested our first version of the model, came out really well. It could actually recognize the questions and give right answers. So we are building our own large language model. It's not easy because all the AI work we did in our earlier avatar was derivative work. In the world of AI, it's called L0 and L1 and L2, right? So we were doing L2, not even L1 work, where we were not even building anything. We were just basically taking APIs and publishing them, right, in different formats. But this is original AI that we are working on, core AI. We are doing our own entity recognition, our own classification, our own, I'll not go into the details, but it's a multimodal AI model, the very cutting edge of AI today. A multimodal AI model basically recognizes inputs in different formats, image, text, voice, transforms them, and then is able to understand. So it takes advantage of the different formats of data. So we are building a multimodal large language model. Nothing like this has been done in the world. Forget in India. Not even the big boys in the world have done anything similar. They haven't done a multimodal AI. They've done multimodal AI, but not multimodal LLM. So we are trying to do a multimodal LLM, which is going to be revolutionary because I think something like ONDC requires a multimodal LLM. You cannot go to farmers in India and tell them to create a catalog. If they can take a photograph of their field and you can convert that into a catalog, that is true AI. That will change India forever. So, and I also did a small experiment on blockchain because I was converting my platform into Web3 because I realized the entire concept of ONDC is distributed, right? It's not aggregated. And that's where majority of the applications on ONDC are failing. So I wrote a paper on blockchain that was December 2022 about how you can run the whole network on blockchain. And guess what? ONDC is now moving to blockchain and I'm part of that discussion. In fact, we are part of the original consortium enabling blockchain on ONDC. I think the opportunities are just mind-blowing where we are sitting today. And so are the risks. I mean, if you're going to do a digital transformation and you're going to talk about cloud, I mean, that was 10 years ago. So it is just so rapid way technology is changing today. And the biggest challenge in that is not technology. It is human. The biggest challenge is absolutely human. I had to make a move from Python to Go. I gave my team 7 days. I gave my team 7 days that they need to learn a new language and start coding in a new language, 7 days. When I started making a move into a large language model in AI, I gave the team 1 week. That's how much. When I give my team, I always give my team 1 week to get started on a new technology because anything beyond that 1 week will not add any value at that point in time. You will learn whatever you want to learn at that point. And
wow. It is exciting, it is encouraging, and it is also scary to look at a world where you give it's wearing a mother's hat, right? I mean, I give my kids good 2 weeks to finish a chapter and come, and here we're talking about 1 week to come learn a completely new language. I think it's a very interesting take on it.
No, but imagine this, the speed at which the world is moving,
Yeah.
right? You come up with a large language model in December, and you have close to 1,000 applications ready in February. Imagine the speed with which this is moving. Imagine the capabilities that technology is bringing. If you're not going to learn, and if you're going to take your own sweet time to go about it, your history. It just won't work. So as startups, obviously corporates can't do that because large ships, when they move, I'm a naval guy, right? Large ships, when they move the whole ocean with them. There's a huge wake that they leave, right? But small cutters like us, we can do whatever we want to do. Nothing changes, right? But the point is, it's important for us to be that agile. And I think the risks and the challenges come from that. Human beings are the biggest challenge in the world of technology today. If you don't have people who are adaptive and agile, you're going to break. you're absolutely going to break. And I faced this myself in the early days of my startup. My developers used to absolutely rebel. And I found it over time that it's better to hire for people who have that capability of change, because that's
Oh,
basically
wow.
what you need to be adapted to. Over to you.
That's interesting take. Neil, I mean, I think we've got a very different perspective, because this is the first time even I'm hearing the pace at which a startup actually works. Having been part of multiple corporate organizations in my whole career, I think it's a completely new perspective from a startup. What is your take on it?
So, I mean, it is interesting. I'll give you a little bit of a use case of one of the things we're doing in Swiss Re, and you'll see that it's in size and complexity, and also in slowness, if we're honest. It just doesn't compare with a startup. I would start off by saying is that when startups sometimes look at the corporate world, they go, oh, that's not for me, is that actually there's an awful lot of opportunities in there for startups to look and say, you cannot solve all the problems of the corporate world, but there are specific ones you can go after. You could really help corporations like Swiss Re, because we find it difficult. As an example, one of the things that Shayak mentioned was about investment in technologies, investment in new approaches. So it could be AI. I'll talk a little bit about data mesh in a minute, but often the issue for corporates is that they're bombarded with a huge amount of things, and they have to choose which things to invest in. So we have shareholders. We can't say, well, we'll spend lots of money on this, we'll spend lots of money on that. We have to choose our investments reasonably wisely and make sure that investment, the technology investment, aligns with our business strategy. And so that often working with startups gives an ability to really move forward very quickly. If you think about that super tanker of the corporate is sending speedboats out in front of us to work out which is the way that we should go, where should we steer our super tanker towards, it really helps us. So just for if people are listening to this podcast as startups, you have a lot of opportunities to help corporates like Swiss Re. So I'd like to just talk a little bit about how we make an investment, and then also how we try and help innovation inside a large corporate like Swiss Re, and how we go about that as enterprise architecture, just to explain a little bit really what happens on the ground. So one of the things is, if you look at Swiss Re, we're what we call a risk-based business. So our business in reinsurance and corporate insurance is all about estimating risk. And risk is based on data. So we have lots of data inside Swiss Re. And one of the things we discovered is that we find it quite difficult. We were finding it quite difficult to introduce new products. We really find it quite difficult. And one of the reasons for that was that we were looking to see, we wanted to use that data for different things. But the data was in traditional corporate, you have systems, the data sits inside a system, and everybody thinks in terms of systems. And we really wanted to move towards that data should be treated like a product. So imagine data is a first-class citizen inside Swiss Re. And so when people talk about new products for our customers, it's about the data we use to create those. So, everybody goes, and you hear about that quite a lot. Swiss Re is not the only company that does that. A lot of corporations face exactly the same problem. How do we free the data? And from an architecture perspective, you'll often hear people talk about data fabric and data mesh and various concepts like that. So how did we go about that? Just to give you an insight. So we said, we need to create data products, and a product, as you know, has a quality, has a high quality or measurable quality. Maybe it is good or bad quality, but you need to know that. You're ready to use. It's easy to use. Think of a product. I go to a supermarket, I take it off the shelf. I want a data product that I can take off the shelf and use. And it's easy, very important, it's easy to apply to the business challenge. Okay, so here's the challenge. Here's an opportunity I see in the market. How do I use data to actually sell something to our customers to do some more business? And if you look at research says, you can reduce time to market by 90%, you can cut costs, et cetera, et cetera. So, that's the opportunity. Just to be clear, the innovation is not in the architecture. The innovation is in the product. Some people get obsessed with saying, how does enterprise architecture have to be innovative? We have to enable innovation. Okay, so what does that mean for us? And especially for reinsurance, financial industry, regulated environment. So just to give you some idea about some of the regulation that sits on top of data, before usually the answer is, tell you what, go out and build a massive data lake, pour everything into it, hire 200 data engineers, 600 data scientists, we'll have a product for you in 3 weeks' time. If you look at some of the regulation around that, an example is that there's localization, which says there are a lot of countries that say, if you use certain types of data, for example, life and health data for things like life insurance, from people in my country, the data has to stay inside my country. So we do business in mainland China. Life and health data from mainland China sits in China, has to be physically kept in China. We can't ship it off somewhere else, just put it into a data lake with some other data, bring it together. That's not how it works. Another example of that is that We have our own data, we have our clients' data, which is be very carefully protected and use third-party data. And that's either regulated or it's also with contractual agreements. So who gets to see that data has to be incredibly carefully controlled within Swiss Re. So we can't pour it into a big pot and say, yeah, guys, go sort it out. So you think about regulation is already acting as a brake for us. So there's things that other companies can do, we can't even think about doing because of those regulations. So what do? So we sat down and we said, how do we solve this data products? We want to create these data products. What does it mean? And the first thing we looked at is the typical one, which is a platform. So the tech discussion. So what platform, how do we do it? Should we buy a platform? Should we build a platform? Those sorts of things. And that's there's a myriad of approaches out there. You have numerous vendors telling you, just buy my product, I'll solve all your problems. By the way, that's never true. So as a startup, never approach a large corporate and say, I'll solve all your problems, because they react very allergically. But there's a lot of approaches out there. And in the end, we chose a hybrid approach. We actually use a commercial product to actually do most of what we want to do. And then we do, for certain differentiated capabilities, we actually build. So we hire data engineers to do that. But that brings us to a second thing. That when people approach us about innovation, is something they often don't think about. It's interesting, Shayak said, there's this technology, this architecture, and there's business. And the skills question is one that a lot of people don't think about when they talk to corporates. Is that, so imagine us, we say, okay, we want to build these data products. We want to bring those data products as close as possible to the business, because the business are the people who are going to innovate. They're going to think about how to use those. And so how do you make that available? Do we hire 1,000 data scientists and they run off and do stuff, but they don't know anything about our business. So we'd have to train all those guys to understand our business. And what we actually decided to do in the end was we really went for democratization of data. So we have to upskill a lot of our business people to understand how to use the data. They're not data scientists, but how to use the data in an innovative way. So how you can use that, combine that to make products. But to go back to the first thing I talked about is that it influenced our platform choice, because we're not going to have a whole, 1,000 data scientists doing this. We're going to have people who have a business background who understand enough about data and how to use those products. And that was then, you can see those two things come together. So the skills you have available inside the organization, if you want to hire, where are you going to hire? You have to think about all those things, and the data localization problem I talked about a minute ago. Where's the data actually physically going to sit, and how are we going to bring that together? They play a role. The last thing I think is, whenever you talk to a company in the financial industry, somebody will mention governance. It'll either be the first word they mention or the second, certainly, but the third word somebody's going to mention is, wait. Nice idea. What about the governance aspect? And you know that, Pavithra, as well. Everybody's talking about governance all the time, and especially in regulated industries. And let's be honest, it's not the most exciting thing, but it's absolutely key to understand how that governance works. So in our case, it's something like, well, how do we make the data consistent? So when we make these data sets available for people to use, can we do it consistently? So every time you look at a data set, you don't have to scratch your head and go, I wonder what the guy is thinking about to make this available. So it has to be done consistently and with a measurable quality. Can I use this data to make a certain type of decision? No, the quality is too low, or yes, the quality is high enough. So there's a certain amount of consistency and quality you need. How do you do that? Do you do that in one giant central organization? It'll be super consistent. I can guarantee the quality won't be great, and the bottleneck will be a massive bottleneck outside the organization. Or do you distribute it? If you distribute it, how does your platform support that? So go back to the platform discussion. So it makes everything, you can imagine when startups come into a corporate world, they look at that and say, my God, why is everything so slow? Why does it take so long to get decisions made? It's not often the making of a decision. We have to make sure that before we invest, we at least understand all those key areas. What does it mean for those? So for example, I don't start investing in something and go, oh my God, this is ungovernable. Or in the case of the regulations I talked about, this localization and access management, can we do that on the platform we buy? If we buy a platform, can we make sure we can do that efficiently, and not that we have to build 700 processes and approvals on top of everything we do? It kills the innovation because it takes so long to get something done. So just as an example of when you actually start to look at that, there's a lot of key problems and that we need to solve. They usually don't involve technology. They actually involve people. A very good colleague of mine said to me, the difference between tech architecture and enterprise architecture is you have to speak to people about it, which is you have to think about what are people in the business thinking, but enterprise architecture is about really bringing those things together. If you want to summarize it, I'd say from a corporate perspective, you might look at enterprise architecture as it tries to reduce the risk associated with innovation. So we look at that and say, look, anytime we innovate, it's complex, especially something like Swiss Re, it's B2B, so generally it's a little bit slower, but you can visit a lot of our customers to move with us. We can't just go out and do it on our own. But how do we reduce the risk associated with innovation? And if you look at things like, and how do we do it in a structured way? So, for example, we don't have lots of bottlenecks, or we don't end up having to reinvent the wheel 4 times because of, oh, we forgot about governance. Oh, we have to that. So just to give you an idea of the role that enterprise architecture plays and how it played with us, and we keep coming up with very pragmatic solutions. So we use hybrid approaches an awful lot. We use a hybrid approach to governance. We say we centralize some things which are key, but then we distribute the rest of them to make sure we have enough speed. So I hope it gives you a picture of how enterprise architecture plays a role within the organization, some of the problems we face there. So when you talk about, maybe we can talk about a little bit about AI in a minute. Just think about that is that there's a lot of these problems you have to solve before the corporate, especially in the regulated industry, the finance industry, could move forward with those. So think about it that way. The last thing I would say is that one of the things where enterprise architecture really adds value is organizations are also always highly siloed. Some organizations, the large ones, they claim they're not, but you will always find they're highly siloed. They have divisions or lines of business or whatever it is. And one of the things enterprise architecture can do is actually can see across the picture. It's like, I see all the silos and I know I can understand how to bring those people together and get them to collaborate in key areas. We're not trying to solve the collaboration problem as a whole, but in a specific area. In our case, it was around data products and data sharing, what we call data connected company. Enterprise architecture playing a key role of identifying where we need to collaborate and then nurturing that and continuous improvement.
Pavithra, I just wanted to add a few things to what Neil said. Is that okay? So I think
Absolutely.
Neil, you gave a masterclass right now on how startups should approach corporates. I think you've summarized all the lessons I've learned the hard way over the last so many years. Just a few things to interpret, maybe some things from the startup point of view. One of the things that most startups find difficult about approaching corporates is, how do I sell to corporates? Now you have to break that down. Who's the right person to approach to begin with? And that makes all the difference. If you approach somebody who does not have the view across the board, they will basically diss you and you're not going to make it through. But if you approach someone like Neil, who's actually looking across those silos, who's able to bring the whole company's requirements together, then you're going to make that sale. Okay. So first is the right person. Second is the right need. I think most of us, when we initially start approaching corporates, we don't realize that corporates are not going to take something because it's tech, it's fancy. They're not. We startups, we are excited about tech and fancy. Corporates will do something because they need to do it. So the question is, what is the need? Have we identified the need? And that, we can approach with the technology, but we need to be very carefully listening to what exactly is the need and can we solve for it. And then once you've done these two, then comes in that enterprise architecture piece, which is basically, are you composable? Are you secure? Are you scalable? And are you open? So this is very important. Composable basically means you build something, can it literally be taken apart and put together in pieces how the enterprise needs it? Because otherwise you're going to be a software development company, not a product company. You're going to keep redoing it for every corporate that you go to. And the second is scalable, right? So because corporates are not going to take something where the TPS is 50. Right. So you need to use something where your throughput is going to be 1 million orders in 15 minutes. Can you do that? Right. And that is where I think a lot of product architecture comes into play, which I'm not going into right now. And I think the third part of it is it intelligent? But more importantly, from the corporate's point of view, is it open? Can they host the data locally? Can that sit inside their systems? Even if it is on the cloud, can they control the security of it? What controls are you giving it to them? You're not going to win a corporate over by saying everything will be mine, you just give me your business. No, that's not going to work. So this is basically me trying to interpret what Neil said, because I faced this tons of times, and I've realized over time that the reason initially we were not making the sale was because we didn't really understand what corporates wanted.
Absolutely great insights.
I love that, Shayak. You're dead right. I mean, maybe just one more thing I'd add to that is that corporates have legacy, and sometimes we get approached by smaller vendors, smaller companies. Is that they completely ignore the legacy issue? Is that when you talk to a corporate can often say, "I would love to do that," but integrating into my legacy situation is I have a large landscape of systems, I have a large organization structure. You have to take account of that. You at least have to be sensitive to it. So think about that if you approach a corporate as a startup, is that they can't just say, yeah, we'll do that, because I have all these other systems I have to run. So how you integrate with legacy, and integrate is the key question there. You don't have to change legacy. Legacy doesn't change quickly, and corporates know that. Corporates look at legacy and they're going to be, that operates well. We're not going to touch that. We'll keep the lights on mode. We're going to innovate somewhere else. But think about how you integrate with corporates, their legacy systems, their what we usually call their business core systems. That's a really important thing, because if you don't address that approaching a corporate, you will find it very difficult to get traction with them.
I should have mentioned that in the composability part. It's actually where the composability comes in. If you're not composable, you're not going to be able to piece it together and plug it in where it needs to plug in. And if you're not going to be able to do that, imagine you're taking a small piece of innovation to a big switchboard, and you're telling them to replace the whole switchboard for your small piece of innovation. That's not going to happen.
This is so interesting, and I love the conversation. But I think I think we will have to take a break. This is an absolutely amazing, insightful conversation that we've had with Niall and Shayak. I hope all of you had great time listening to their insights as much as I did. I mean, I actually have goosebumps right now. Taking two different perspectives, two different eyes on how enterprise architecture is perceived. I thank you for being part of this journey and look forward to seeing you all in our next episode of Futurised. Please leave your thoughts and questions, and we will surely reach out to you.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks very much for your time. Really appreciate it.